Welcome to Livestock Podcast, sponsored by the University of Tennessee Beef and Forage Center. I'm Bruno Pedreira, Senior Director and Forage Extension Specialist with the University of Tennessee, joined today by Dr. Katie Mason, UT Extension Beef Specialist. How are you doing today, Dr. Mason?
I'm good. We're wrapping up classes and getting to the time of year when we don't have students on campus to fight for parking.
Yeah, sad time. Summer here is all sad. We don't have students for a while, but at least it's raining, and a lot of our guys are trying to make hay, and we are very happy because today we have here Charles Hord, our Executive Vice President for Tennessee Cattlemen Association. Man, we have been trying to put you on the hook for a while. Finally got you in Knoxville with us.
It's good to be in Knoxville. It's good to be back on the old stomping grounds.
Yeah. Good. Well, welcome to our University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture here to talk a little bit about TCA and what you guys have been doing so far to help producers here.
Sure. So I work for the Tennessee Cattlemen's Association, and our job is to represent cattle producers, and that can mean a lot of different things. Whether we try to promote, beef consumption or production, or protect your interest when issues come up in Nashville or Washington D.C. We try to make sure we listen to the interest of our producers. I have a board of directors that is my boss. They're all cattle producers spread across Tennessee. There's about 20 of them that serve on the board.
Okay.
And they provide me guidance and the issues, and hopefully hear from producers locally about what concerns them and what their issues are. And we try to take that message with us when we go to Nashville or DC. And also when issues pop up, in the news, if there's an animal welfare issue or there's something that's, kind of could give cattle producers a black eye or impact our industry, we try to make sure we're engaged on that as well, and sharing our story about how we raise beef, and why it is such a great product, and why we should all be consuming copious amounts of beef with every meal.
What's for dinner, right?
That's right. It's what's for dinner. So speaking of TCA, can you tell us a little bit about how folks can get involved at the local level and maybe sort of the structure of TCA and how that works?
Sure. So we do have the state association. I work out of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, but we have about 60 local chapters that are spread throughout Tennessee. West Tennessee, probably not as many because tend to be more row crop focused and not as many cattle
As
there.
much as livestock as we have in the rest of the state.
Sure. But Middle and East Tennessee, there's probably a County Cattlemen's Association group you can get involved in. So when you join TCA, you have the option, and we certainly encourage you to join your county association as well, and we can put you in touch with them. And so when they have their local meetings, it's a good chance to go and get engaged. And it's a lot of fellowship. You can learn a whole lot just from sitting in a meeting and finding out your neighbor raises cattle down the road and what kind of cattle he has, and maybe he has some good seed stock for sale, or maybe he's looking for something that you have. And so there's just a lot of benefits, I think, from having that camaraderie and getting to know your neighbors and talking about the issues. And then ultimately, we hope that county association will have we have district vice presidents that serve on my board from throughout the state. So hopefully, any issues that come up at the local association will be carried forward to us as a state association, and then hopefully carried forward to the national association, because we're affiliated with our National Cattlemen's Beef Association too. So that's kind of how the whole grassroots system works. Hopefully, with your local producer, whether it's in Knox County or wherever you are, can get engaged through his county chapter and have his concerns carried all the way through to the national level.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's and we're always discussing, every time you join a new association or wherever is the association, you're always looking for what are the benefits, right?
Sure.
Why should I do this? And I think you already mentioned a few of them. And we have been going to cattlemen's meetings in the local level with extension agents, and in each county, it's always a really nice conversation, at least.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. And I didn't really talk about the relationship we've had with UTIA for a long time. But you guys not only supporting the counties, but you guys speak at a whole lot of meetings, and that educational component is really important, because that's where producers where the rubber hits the road, right? For all the research you do, all the efforts you do trying to improve, our industry, you can take it directly to the producers that way, and it works for everybody, I think, to get that message out there. So we're really appreciative of having that kind of close relationship we've had with UTIA really since we were founded. They were, some of your predecessors were very involved with the founding of our association.
Oh, yeah.
How we got off the ground.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. So kind of shifting away from talking about TCA and there certainly can't be many hot topics in the beef industry right now, but
Yes.
maybe we could talk about a few. So let's just open up with maybe the most recent announcement about the situation with the screwworm in Mexico and how that's working.
Yes, so it's kind of been a hot button issue. If you kind of follow the news, they've talked about closing the border to Mexican cattle, and they've just literally, what is today? The 14th,
Tuesday, yeah, the 13th, I don't know,
13th, 14th.
a couple days
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. So they've literally just closed the border again to imports from Mexico. Those cattle that cross the border and go into feedlots in the U.S. and ultimately are processed in the U.S. Just because of the concern over this New World screwworm that we're seeing. It's endemic to, I guess, Central South America. It's kind of been monitored. It's been controlled through a program where sterile screw flies, male screw flies, are released into the wild population, and these sterile screw flies are supposed to be maybe a little more vigorous and outcompete the native screw flies, the males. And so then the eggs that the females lay are barren or don't hatch. So that's the way the population's been controlled for a really long time, and it's worked. We've been fortunate to not have the screw worm and screw fly move north into Mexico and in the US for a long time. But unfortunately, we're seeing some of these screw flies have been found in Mexico now, and they're moving their way north. And it's a big concern because these screw worms do get into the animal, whether it's a cow or a pet or anything. It can get into this animal and kind of eat its way into it, and ultimately it can cause a death if it's not treated. And it would be very expensive to if we do get it in the U.S. and it becomes endemic again, to try to control it in the U.S. So they're really trying hard to figure out a way to keep it
Catch it on the front
right,
end.
right, keep it out, right.
Yep.
So hopefully they can get it in Mexico and keep it from spreading from the southern part of Mexico north. So there's some bills. There was actually, when we were up in DC last month, our big ask when we visited with our elected officials was $200 million to build a screw fly facility in the United States to breed these screw flies, these sterile male screw flies that we can release into Mexico and into Central America to control the populations, to keep them moving north. The facility, I think, is in Panama, that has been producing these male screw flies, and evidently they've had some issues with quality control or whatever, and so it's allowed these screw flies to move north, and it's a big concern for us right now.
It would be great to work on this here as well, right? And have our own
Yeah,
capability to
exactly.
help it out and
Exactly.
keep the problem out of the country
Yeah.
as much as we can.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about tariffs.
Yes.
We have been dealing with, in this last few months with different takes on tariffs. It does affect the livestock production chain in the country. How is TCA seeing all of this?
Yeah. So I think it's important. Sometimes we don't realize how important exports are to our cattle or to our domestic cattle market. I think CattleFax puts the value at $400 or $450 per head, per carcass, in terms of the value that's added thanks to the export markets. And this is Dr. Emmett Rawls, for those of you who have been around a while. He was the one that told me this. We export like $100 million worth of tongue to Japan and $100 million worth of livers to Egypt. And those are cuts we tend to not eat in the U.S.
We'll never eat that.
Yes,
right?
I've had liver before. I don't recommend it. I'm sorry, but the Egyptians love it for whatever reason. So it has a lot of value. If we weren't able to export it, it would be worth a few pennies to go into dog food. Whereas now it adds a lot of money to the value of every head sold. And then, of course, there's the grain fed steaks that we do better than anybody. That's a whole lot of that value as well when we're able to export that to Asia or even Mexico and Canada. Those are big trade partners for beef. So any kind of barrier to free trade is a real concern for cattle producers. So any kind of tariffs, any kind of thing that impacts our ability to ship into China, they've become a big buyer of U.S. beef. It's worrisome. I will share that our national cattlemen's has kind of taken a wait and see approach, I guess, to see how it all works out, because there are some non-tariff barriers for U.S. beef, like the European Union blocks the importation of some U.S. beef, and China and other countries do as well. So I guess our hope is that this is kind of used for negotiation, and we can kind of President Trump and his negotiators can use these threats of tariffs to maybe remove some of those barriers,
we may be able to explore different countries, you mean,
Exactly.
right?
Expand our markets.
Expand the market.
Yep. But there is a concern if the tariffs were to remain in place
Mhm.
that it could
Sure.
impact what,
The whole
what
chain.
we're the whole supply chain and what we receive, here at the local sale barn in Tennessee.
Mhm. Yeah, so I teach the beef management class here, and we talk about how what's going on elsewhere affects here and vice versa. So it's important to stay abreast of those different issues. And so thinking about that and product and trade and that kind of thing, I know that Cattlemen's has a strong stance on cell cultured protein, right? And
Yes,
what we should
yes.
call that and how we should move forward with that. So
Yeah.
that could be a whole podcast in itself, but let's just kind of touch on that for a minute.
Sure. So, if I never know exactly how familiar people are with the cell cultured product,
Sure.
but basically, scientists have figured out a way to remove some of the cells from whether it's a calf or a lamb or a pig. They're able to put these cells in some kind of vat or feed it some kind of serum to make these cells reproduce and grow. And from I guess, a cellular level, they're hoping to produce the same cut of beef that we raise on our farms
Mhm.
and market it as an alternative to
Mhm.
maybe what we do on our farms. So I think our National Cattlemen's Association, and we agree with this, is we have free will in our country. If somebody thinks they want to eat a piece of, I don't want to call it beef, it's a product,
Yeah.
that's cell cultured, they have that right to do so. And we're
Mhm.
not going to try to keep them from doing that. I feel like consumers, once they kind of understand how it's produced and how it's grown, they probably will not be as interested in
Mhm.
purchasing it, but they have that right. So we haven't been engaged on trying to ban cell cultured products or tell consumers that they shouldn't be offered in the grocery store. It's kind of like the plant-based products.
Yeah.
Consumers have spoken and said, we don't really like this product, and
But it's
we've
there,
seen
right?
it's
Yeah.
there, yeah, and that's okay. So we do feel strongly, and this is that consumers should know exactly what they're buying when
Mhm.
they go to the grocery store. So, like, the plant-based products are labeled plant-based products. We want these cell cultured products to be clearly labeled as cell cultured. We don't want them to say hamburger. We don't want them to say beef. We don't want them to use those terms. We just want to make sure consumers can
Yep.
differentiate between what we raise on our farms and what
It's
is being
produced in a
produced
lab.
in a lab.
Mhm.
Exactly. So there were bills in Tennessee that actually address some of this as well. They didn't pass. I think there was still some conversations about the language and whatnot, but I think it could come up again. But there was a bill that was an outright ban on cell culture products in Tennessee that we were neutral on. We didn't support it or oppose it. And then there was another bill that we did support that would have created some clarity on exactly what labeling was going to be required. And we did support that bill, but neither one of them actually passed. But I suspect we'll see some next year in the General Assembly.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that's I always like the idea that if you can be clear with whatever is the label,
Right.
we can make the right
Yes,
choice, right?
absolutely.
Mhm.
And I think we all have the capability to make their own decisions and figure out what you have for your life, what you want for your life, and what you want to eat every day.
Exactly.
And I can tell you, I'm a beef guy. I'll have my grill, and I'll have a big piece of steak on Saturday at home. That's what we do.
That's right.
So you were mentioning about the bills as well. Let's talk a little bit about the veterinary authority bill as well. I think you guys have been working on this. It's also important for Tennessee farmers.
It is. It is important. So there was a bill in Nashville in the General Assembly that would have removed some authority from a state vet's office in terms of her or whoever the state veterinarian is, their ability to act quickly in case of an animal disease outbreak.
Mhm.
So, like, we've had bird flu, unfortunately,
Yeah.
in Tennessee. So we've already had it
Still
issues.
dealing with this.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going away, unfortunately. So, luckily, or I guess unfortunately, we've had this issue, but our state veterinarian has been able to act quickly. She's been able to say, okay, we found it. We need to quarantine this area. We need to depopulate to keep it from spreading. And by her being able to act quickly and respond, it's kept it, I would think, from spreading even a wider and
Mhm.
creating more of an impact on, the poultry producers in Tennessee. And we feel like that's important for her to have this authority to act quickly. We feel like she understands the issues, knows what needs to be done. We've had lots of communications with the state vet's office. They've run simulations on how to have quarantines and how to depopulate and how to handle these issues when they come up. And this bill that was proposed would have limited her authority or the state veterinarian's authority to act without approval from a joint committee in the General Assembly. And I just think a worst case scenario of something like foot and mouth
Mhm.
sees in
Yep.
Tennessee,
Gosh.
we need to act right away. And we don't need to wait for this joint committee of the General Assembly, which they could be out of session. So they'd have to come back into Nashville, plan a meeting, vote, decide
It
how.
might take days.
Exactly. And in that time, we could see a small quarantine area or limited depopulation area become all of
Much-
Tennessee
yep,
or all of the Southeast. So that was why we opposed the bill. Fortunately, we worked very closely with some of our industry partners, like the pork producers, like Tennessee Farm Bureau. Really, a lot of the ag industry got engaged on stuff like this, and we do work together quite a bit when stuff like this comes up. So it did not pass.
Mhm.
I'm hoping it won't come up again next year, but it may. But we do work. We have a kind of a barnyard coalition in Tennessee that we work with when bills like this come up that we're concerned with, and we were able to kind of pull all our resources together, let folks know that the elected officials know how we felt.
Mhm.
We asked a lot of our local producers to reach out directly to their officials because when they hear from a producer in their district that votes
Uh-huh.
and says, "Hey, this is a bad idea," they
Mhm.
tend to listen a little better.
Yeah, that's
And,
right.
and so we used our networking and that whole grassroots system that we talked about earlier, and it really helped us keep that bill from becoming a reality because it did have support from some people in the General Assembly. That's good.
Mhm. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of, I guess, a couple years ago now, the bill that addressed mRNA vaccines and livestock, which I think also had a part in it that would have limited the state vets' ability to make some decisions. So, can you talk a little bit about that one too?
Yeah, so that mRNA bill has been brought forth a couple of years now, and it was brought forth again this year. And basically, that bill, the way it was worded, I think would have said it was a labeling bill. So if you used an mRNA vaccine in
Mhm.
livestock, you would have had to label it as an mRNA, usage, and it would have had to been treated differently because that product then couldn't enter the regular supply chain.
Right.
It would have been had to go into the a backgrounder in wherever Oklahoma to a feedlot in Iowa to the processing wherever it would be, that product would have had to be kept separate from any
Mhm.
other product because of this mRNA requirement. And it's really not feasible. There's really no way to do that. So this bill would have basically said producers in Tennessee couldn't use an mRNA
Right.
vaccine. It would have effectively said, we can't use it. And it's important to realize, I think, that we don't actually have any vaccines or any
Mhm.
medicines that we use right now that uses mRNA technology.
Mhm.
So it's not really even available. But if it were to become available and it were to be approved at the federal level,
Mhm.
and if this vaccine was the best vaccine out there for our
Mhm.
cattle producers to use, we felt like they should be able to make their own decision, right? If they
Yeah.
want to use this vaccine, let's make it available. They certainly don't have to, but they could, and we wanted it to be available. So we opposed that bill.
Mhm.
Fortunately, it did not pass again. We had, the way it works with our board, we had some pretty vigorous conversation amongst our board members. 'Cause
Sure.
there are people concerned about mRNA
Mhm.
vaccines, and
Mhm.
probably rightfully so when you think about some of the COVID rollouts. But our stance was that this isn't being rolled out quickly. It's going through the process of approval through FDA and all the trials and tests that they have to do to get vaccines approved. And there are some we understand maybe in the pipeline.
Mhm.
So it's not being rushed. They're going to have to do the trials. They're going to do all this stuff. So let's not limit our cattle producers' ability to use what could be potentially
Mhm.
an important vaccine for their health protocols.
And I think that's kind of the beauty of an organization like TCA, right? You guys are fighting for things that are already in place, but
Yeah.
also for something like this that
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
be a restriction in the future, right?
Exactly.
We need to keep the eyes on things that are coming, and you'll be ready to, if this is the one that we are going to have, and that's the one that's going to be the best one to use, why not have the
Yeah.
possibility to use it, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This
The things that don't happen are often more important than the things
Yeah.
that do.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you let a bill like this pass, and 10 years down the road, say, yes, now we can use that
Yes,
thing. So
yes,
keep
yeah.
the eyes open and try to. Let's go to our final topic here so we can wrap up with you, man. Let's talk a little bit about farmland preservation, right? The bill has been signed,
Yes.
but it is as it is it needs to be in a constitutional amendment.
Correct.
It needs a referendum.
Correct.
So what are the next steps on this?
Yeah, yeah. So a little background on it is the American Farmland Trust has said Tennessee is one of the worst states in terms of losing our farmland to development, like the third worst state in terms of the amount of.
Tennessee's a beautiful place to live,
It is.
man.
It is. We get all these South Americans moving up here.
All of the
Yes, what are we going to do? So it is beautiful. The people want to come here, and we certainly appreciate that, and we understand that, and we welcome them. But
Thank you.
we are losing farmland. We are losing,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
resources that are pretty
Understand.
important to us. So there is an effort that was brought this year to create a fund to help protect farmland, try to encourage landowners. You know, it's tough. Farmers tend to be, you know, cash poor and land rich, right?
Mhm.
So when they're at their
Mhm.
retirement age, they often need to sell land,
Yeah.
you know,
And
to
cash it,
live.
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, they've worked hard all their life, so I can't certainly don't, you know, hold that against anybody. But we're losing land when it's sold. It's usually sold for a subdivision or you know, commercial use. It's not going back to a farm a lot of the time.
Mhm.
So this bill, it was basically $25 million, would have given landowners a little bit more of an option on how they could potentially preserve their farmland by maybe entering into a trust or some
Mhm.
kind of agreement where this property would not be developed either for a certain number of years or maybe in perpetuity
Mm.
if they're able to do that. And it's just another option that we can hopefully a tool in the toolbox that producers could use
We'll
to
be
say,
able to.
hey, we're gonna be able to protect a little more land than we could. And since it is a constitutional amendment, no, I'm sorry, that's not a constitutional amendment. I was talking about the sales tax. I misspoke earlier.
Okay.
But so it did pass. It's been signed into law, so it will be funded. And I guess the governor will ultimately decide a little bit about how it's administered. And I think the Tennessee Department of Agriculture will be the ones administering this bill in terms of how producers are able to apply for some of this money to help them protect their farmlands.
That's good.
Yeah. Yes,
It's
it is.
really,
It is
really
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. It's neat to hear about all the things that you're involved in, and we appreciate what you do, you know, on whether it's in Nashville or DC or you know, at county offices or
level.
whatever it is. So really appreciate hearing from you about the different things that you're working on, and we know that you're working maybe in the background sometimes and we don't recognize it a lot, but we appreciate it.
Yes,
So
thank you. Yeah.
it was great talking with you, and
Yeah, I think we to wrap up this, I think we should invite people to come to NCBA. It's going to be in Tennessee next year.
It is. It is. So it rotates around the country. It's coming back to Nashville after a few years. It hasn't been here. So I encourage producers. It's in early February. You'll hear more about it, but you know, a huge trade show, like 1,000 vendors there, speakers, whatnot. So
From all over the country.
all over the
right?
country, absolutely. Very, you know, people you've heard of, people you've maybe seen in the magazines, whatnot. So I encourage producers to think about going and attending. If nothing else, get a 1-day trade show pass. You can go to the trade show and see everything that they have to offer. And then I can't miss this opportunity to plug our state annual meeting,
Which is right
as well,
after.
which is right afterwards. It's going to be in Franklin, February 5th and 6th. And we are going to have some really good speakers there as well. Dr. Temple Grandin's coming back to Tennessee. She's always a big draw for
very
us.
good.
People like to hear her.
Yeah.
We'll have our own trade show. We'll have some, it's at the Franklin at their expo center. So the good thing about that is we can have a live BQA demos. Dr.
Oh,
Strickland has done the live BQA with us with a cow
That's
institute
awesome.
and talk about, you know, checking teeth and how to give those shots and how to handle them. We'll do, we'll have our state graders come. Rob Thomas, I think, is going to come and do a grading demonstration. So you can understand when you sell your calves at the market, why it's graded this way as opposed to this way.
Sure.
He's going to talk through what he looks for when he makes those calls. So a lot of good meetings, a lot of good events.
That's
coming.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be all there.
That's right. Yeah,
All
come
right.
see us if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Charles, thanks again for being here in Knoxville with us. So again, we have been here today with Charles Hord, Executive Vice Director for the Tennessee Cattlemen Association. You know, awesome conversation, discussing
Wonderful.
livestock production in the station in the state of Tennessee. Hope you guys will be here for the next livestock podcast. Hope to see you all soon and there in Nashville
Yes.
in February next year. Thank you all.